Hello and welcome to another math video. We are going to be continuing our process of talking about the equation of a circle, but this time we're going to be looking at two examples where you're not sure what the radius is because you cannot count straight across or up and down on a graph. You were just given the center and another point on the circle and try to determine what the equation is. There are two main methods of doing this, and both are equally effective and good ways to do it. And we're going to go over an example of both in this video. So to start with, we're doing the two methods are to do this process where you're given a center and another point on the circle is you either define r squared, you're either going to substitute or plug in the point you're given in addition to the center into the equation for where x and y are, or you can use the distance formula to see how far apart the center and the point are, and then use that as the r value. So let's start with plugging in the point. So if we have our center in number 3 at 4 and then -7, well, we could write in to our equation here that the 4 would go right here, and we know the -7 would go right here. We don't know what the r value is, and so we're going to need to plug in the 5 and the 3 into our equation where the x and the y usually go. So if we would have an x and a y, we would have x and then y right there. And we're going to have the 5 and the 3 go into those x's and y's. So let's kind of start writing this out. So we have our parentheses and our x, which is going to be a 5 this time. And we have our minus a 4 from our center squared. And then plus our y value is a 3 now. So our 3 is going to be our y. And then subtract our -7 and square that. And we're just going to see this is all supposed to be equal to r squared. So we could basically put that whole left thing into our calculator exactly as it's written and figure out what r squared is supposed to be equal. We can evaluate each of these parentheses. Our first one ends up being equal to 1, and then our second one ends up being equal to 100, meaning that r squared is going to be equal to 101. And we just need to find the square root of both sides. Square root, the r squared would be r. Square root of 101 would be approximately equal to 10.05. So r equals 10.05. And most of the time, you're not even going to bother to find what r is. You really only need to know what r squared is. So it turns out that the r value we're looking for, our r squared value, is 101. So if we write out our equation here, we end up with an equation that is x minus 4 squared plus y plus 7 squared is going to be equal to 101. And we have found the equation of that circle where the center is 4, -7, and one of the points on the outline of the circle is 5, 3. In this second example, our center is the origin, and it's going through a point -5, 2. So we could write out our equation as we have it so far, x minus -5 and y minus 2 is going to be equal to r squared. But we're going to try to use the distance formula, which if we scroll up here, we can see that our distance formula is right here up at the top. You may want to write that down in your notes now and pause the video, because we're going to be using that in this example. Now that you've written that down, let's try using the distance formula to see how far away really the point 0, 0 is from the point -5, 2. So we're going to basically do that on this right side in the blank space we have. So we're going to have this square root of our second point, -5, the x part, minus the first x part, which is just 0. And we're going to square that. And then we're going to add that to the difference between the y's. So we have to do the second y minus the first y, which is 0. And we're going to square that. And all of this is going to end up being equal to r. How far away the center 0, 0 is from our other point, -5, 2. And if we just look at some to evaluate this, we basically have -5 squared, because the zeros are going to end up not mattering here. So the zeros in this case aren't going to matter, but if they weren't 0, you could just use your calculator pretty easily for that part. So we have -5 squared is equal to 25, and 2 squared is equal to 4. And so that means our square root is going to end up being the square root of 29 equal to r. Now we could put that into our calculator, but we don't even need to bother, because what I'm going to do now is just square the square root and square our r squared, and it turns out that would just give us 29 being equal to r. And that's enough. We can finish out our circle equation we started earlier, and that means our equation is x plus 5 squared plus y minus 2 squared is going to be equal to 29, which is what we found as r squared. And that completes the process here of determining the equation of a circle where you know the center, whether it's the origin or whether it's a point like 4, -7, and you have one other point on the circle, and you're trying to determine the equation of that circle. Both of these methods, whether they be plugging or substituting the point you're given into the circle equation, or it is using the distance formula to figure out the length of your radius, these can be used in any of the situations, and you can just pick the method that works best for you. Thank you for watching.